Have you ever wondered why some people break free from the ordinary, while others stay stuck in the same routines for years, even decades? Why do a few confront their fears and evolve, while most choose comfort over challenge, only to later complain about the results? The answer is uncomfortable yet simple. Most people run from the very thing that could save them. We live in a time where everyone wants to feel special, but very few are willing to pay the real price for transformation. Millions dream of a better life, yet when faced with hard choices, they retreat into their comfort zones. And then comes the question that one to go away. Are you willing to walk the path that most people avoid? There's a truth few are willing to face, one that can completely shift your understanding of happiness and success. Why is it that, despite endless opportunities for growth, so few choose to truly evolve? Christ once said, "Many are called, but few are chosen." That ancient phrase reveals something profound about human nature, something we rarely examine. Psychiatrist M. Scott Peck, after years of working with patients, came to a striking realization. Nearly everyone has the potential to grow. It's not a matter of intelligence, resources, or opportunity. The real barrier is this: most people aren't willing to do what growth actually demands. So what prevents most people from breaking free from mediocrity? The answer lies in a choice we make every day, often without realizing it. During decades of clinical work, Peck observed a pattern that constantly repeated itself. His patients would arrive at his office with various problems: depression, anxiety, destructive relationships, addictions, a sense of existential emptiness. All these apparently different problems had something in common. The root was in people's systematic refusal to face the basic reality of human existence. The first truth that few have the courage to accept is simple and painful. Life is difficult, period. There's no way to escape this. Problems will appear. Difficulties will arise. Pain will knock on your door whether you want it or not. That's the rule of the game, not the exception. One of the biggest signs of maturity and wisdom is to stop being surprised by this. It's accepting that problems are part of life, just like breathing. When you truly understand this, you stop wasting energy complaining and fighting with reality. You stop asking why me and start asking how am I going to solve this? But look around you. How many people do you know who have truly accepted this truth? Most live in a constant state of shock and indignation every time something doesn't go as planned. They act as if they have the right to a life without obstacles, as if the universe should conspire in their favor all the time. The difference between those who grow and those who remain in mediocrity lies exactly there. When faced with a problem, you can choose two things: keep lamenting or take action. One choice keeps you trapped in the same place. The other moves you forward. Simple as that. But here lies the danger. There's an illusion that contaminates our modern society and catches almost everyone by surprise. Many people believe that if they achieve certain things in their external life, the problems will disappear. They think that if they have enough money, the perfect relationship, the dream career, then life will become easy. This is one of the biggest mistakes that exist. This illusion is constantly fed by the media, social networks, advertising. We see successful people smiling in perfect photos and think they found the secret to a life without problems. But that's just the surface. Behind every external success, there are challenges you can't even imagine. The truth is that each level of life brings its own problems. Rich people have rich people problems. Poor people have poor people problems. Married people have married people problems. Single people have single people problems. There's no point where you arrive and the challenges end. What changes is your capacity to deal with them. People with little money worry about basic bills. People with lots of money worry about investments, taxes. People who approach them for personal gain. People who are single want to find someone. People who are married have to deal with relationship conflicts. Each situation has its advantages and disadvantages. When people discover that external success doesn't solve everything, they often panic. That's when they start using what we can call evasion tactics. They blame others for their problems, procrastinate on everything, pretend everything's fine when it's not. Some use alcohol, others become addicted to social media, others to work, others to relationships. Anything to avoid feeling the real pain of life. These evasion tactics are infinitely creative. There are people who get lost in conspiracy theories to avoid having to take responsibility for their own lives. Others become addicted to entertainment, spending hours watching series, playing video games, browsing aimlessly on the internet. Some become workaholics, using work as an excuse not to deal with personal problems. There are even those who use personal growth itself as a form of escape. They keep jumping from course to course, from therapy to therapy, from guru to guru, always searching for the next miraculous technique that will solve everything without effort. It's a sophisticated form of procrastination. The problem is that running away from problems doesn't solve them. Actually, it does the opposite. The problems grow and multiply. It's like having a debt and pretending it doesn't exist. Over time, the interest keeps accumulating until the situation becomes completely unsustainable. The difference is that here we're talking about your mental and emotional health. Each avoided problem becomes two problems. Each difficult conversation you don't have generates more conflicts. Each decision you postpone makes the consequences worse. It's like an emotional cancer that grows silently until it becomes impossible to ignore. There's a concept in psychology that explains much of modern human suffering. It's the idea that when we avoid the legitimate suffering of life, we end up creating a type of suffering that's even worse. Neurosis. Carl Jung, one of the greatest psychologists in history, said something that should be taught in schools. Neurosis is always a substitute for legitimate suffering. What does this mean? It means that when you run away from the natural pain that comes with growth and problem solving, your mind creates an artificial pain that's much worse. It's as if your psyche were charging with interest all the suffering you tried to avoid. Jung observed this in his patients for decades. People who avoided facing their fears developed irrational phobias. People who ran away from responsibilities developed generalized anxiety. People who couldn't deal with losses developed chronic depression. In all cases, the neurotic suffering was much worse than the original suffering they tried to avoid. Think about the people you know who live always anxious, depressed, with irrational fears, always complaining about life. In most cases, these people are paying the price for having run away from real problems for too long. The layers of evasion have accumulated, and now they're trapped in a prison they built themselves. It's as if the human mind had an emotional accounting system. You can postpone the payment, but you can't escape the bill. And the more you postpone, the higher the interest gets. The person who avoids having a frank conversation with their partner ends up developing insomnia and panic attacks. The person who does not face their professional fears gets stuck in jobs they hate and develops panic syndrome. Here we arrive at a truth that goes against everything modern society teaches. Suffering when it's legitimate is not your enemy. Actually, it's your greatest teacher. Benjamin Franklin said a phrase that perfectly summarizes this. The things that hurt instruct. But our culture has a very unhealthy relationship with suffering. We've been conditioned to believe that any type of pain is bad and should be avoided at all costs. We take medicine for the slightest headache, avoid uncomfortable conversations, run away from any situation that might cause us anguish. Legitimate suffering is that which comes when you face your problems head-on. It's the pain of having a difficult conversation that needs to be had. It's the discomfort of leaving your comfort zone to learn something new.
It's the anguish of looking at your flaws and working to change them. This type of suffering strengthens you, teaches you, makes you grow. Imagine a muscle that has never been exercised. When you start training, it hurts. This pain is a sign that the muscle is adapting, getting stronger. If you stop training to avoid the pain, the muscle remains weak. The same happens with our emotional and mental capacity. Discomfort is a sign of growth. Even depression, which everyone wants to avoid, can sometimes be a healthy signal. It might be your mind warning you that something in your life urgently needs to change. It's like fever, which is uncomfortable, but shows that your body is fighting an infection. The problem isn't feeling. The problem is not listening to what the feeling is trying to tell you. There's a point in almost every person's life where the suffering becomes so great that something awakens within them. It's as if there were a limit. And when you cross that limit, you finally find the strength to change. Suddenly, staying in the same painful situation becomes harder than doing what needs to be done. This moment is different for each person. For some, it's when the relationship becomes completely unsustainable. For others, it's when health starts giving warning signs. For some, it's when they realize they're wasting their best years in a life that doesn't satisfy them. But there's always this moment of awakening. Nietzsche, the German philosopher, spoke about being grateful to one's own misery because it was what opened the doors to transformation. Sounds strange maybe, but how many times have you seen someone who only changed after hitting rock bottom? Sometimes pain is the only thing that gives us the necessary motivation to abandon destructive habits and seek a better life. History is full of examples of people who transform their worst experiences into fuel for great achievements. Stephen Hawking used his illness as motivation to make revolutionary discoveries in physics. The crucial difference lies in understanding that there's suffering that builds and suffering that destroys. Constructive suffering moves you forward, teaches you, strengthens you. Neurotic suffering leaves you paralyzed, ruminating on the same thoughts, trapped in the same patterns. One liberates you, the other imprisons you. How do you distinguish between the two? Constructive suffering always has a clear purpose. It's the pain that comes with the effort to improve, to grow, to solve problems. It has a beginning, middle, and end. Neurotic suffering is circular, without purpose, without progress. It's like walking in circles in the same place. When you understand this difference, you start seeing life's problems in a completely different way. Instead of trying to run away from them, you see them as opportunities for growth. Each problem solved makes you stronger, wiser, more capable of dealing with the next challenge. The truth is that solving problems is one of the main sources of meaning in human life. Think about the moments when you felt most proud of yourself. They were probably moments when you overcame some obstacle, conquered some fear, achieved something that seemed impossible. This is no coincidence. There's something in human nature that feels alive when it's overcoming challenges. That's why people pay to do difficult trails, practice extreme sports, solve complex puzzles. The brain releases chemicals that make us feel good when we overcome obstacles. Problems are like weights in life's gym. They exist to strengthen your mental and emotional muscles. Each problem you face and solve develops your courage, your wisdom, your capacity to deal with difficult situations. Avoiding problems is like avoiding exercise. In the short term, it might seem more comfortable, but in the long term, it leaves you weak and unprepared. Look at the most respected figures in human history. Buddha faced suffering head-on and transformed that experience into wisdom that helped millions of people. Christ went through unimaginable pain and transformed it into compassion and love. They didn't run away from difficulty. They went through it and came out transformed on the other side. Mahatma Gandhi used his experiences of discrimination to develop a philosophy of peaceful resistance that changed the world. Martin Luther King Jr. transformed the pain of racial injustice into one of the most powerful messages of hope in history. Nelson Mandela used 27 years in prison to become a symbol of reconciliation. The difference between these people and the majority isn't that they didn't feel pain. It's that they didn't try to run away from pain. They understood that pain was part of the path to something greater, and that's why they managed to transform suffering into spiritual growth, and ultimately into a joy much deeper than any superficial pleasure. But there's an obstacle that prevents most people from following this path. Marie-Louise Fonfrance, one of Jung's main collaborators, made an observation that's uncomfortable. Most of the time when people run away from problems, it's not out of fear or incapacity. It's out of pure laziness. This observation might seem harsh, but it's profoundly true. Jung even said that laziness is humanity's greatest passion. This might sound exaggerated, but when you stop to think about it, it makes sense. How many times have you known exactly what you needed to do to improve your life, but simply didn't do it? How many times did you choose the easier path, even knowing it wasn't the best? M. Scott Peck had an even deeper view of this. For him, laziness is like a force of entropy in our psyche. It's a natural tendency in all of us toward inertia, toward staying in the same place, toward avoiding the effort that growth requires. It's like a kind of original sin that we all carry and need to fight against every day. Peck observed that this laziness isn't just physical. There's mental laziness, emotional laziness, spiritual laziness. It's the tendency to always choose the option that requires less effort, less responsibility, less growth. The worst part is that laziness is intelligent. It doesn't always appear in obvious ways. It's not just that laziness of not wanting to work or exercise. Often it disguises itself as things that even seem reasonable. Laziness can appear as fear of growth. Better to stay as I am. At least I know what to expect. It can disguise itself as false humility. Who am I to want to be better? It can appear as cynicism. What's the point of trying? The world is like this anyway, or as conformism. My life isn't perfect, but at least it's peaceful. All of these are subtle ways of avoiding the real effort that personal growth requires. It's easier to find a justification for staying still than to admit that we simply don't want to do the necessary work. After all, making excuses doesn't hurt, but growing does. One of the most common rationalizations is the idea that life is meant to be enjoyed, not to suffer. I work too hard to stress myself out even more at home. I deserve to relax and enjoy life. Life is already difficult. Why complicate it more? All of this might seem sensible, but deep down it's just laziness disguised as life philosophy. There's also intellectual laziness. It's when a person stops questioning their beliefs, stops learning new things, stops thinking for themselves. They prefer to accept the majority's opinions, follow trends, repeat what everyone says. It's easier than forming their own opinions based on reflection and experience. Emotional laziness appears when a person avoids having difficult conversations, doesn't process their emotions, doesn't try to understand their behavior patterns. It's easier to blame others, create drama, be a victim of circumstances than to take responsibility for their own feelings. But how do you overcome this natural tendency toward laziness without torturing yourself in the process? Nature had an interesting answer. He spoke about the spirit of gravity as a symbol of laziness. For him, the best way to combat laziness wasn't with guilt or self-flagellation, but with lightness and even with laughter. The idea is to face the fight against laziness as an adventure, not as a heavy obligation. Laugh at your own resistance instead of judging yourself for it. Have a light but determined spirit. Do what needs to be done, but without carrying the world on your shoulders. Nature believed that laughter was one of the most powerful forces for human transformation. When you can laugh at your own limitations, they lose power over you. When you see your fears and laziness with humor, it becomes easier to overcome them. This approach works because true happiness doesn't come from passivity or easy pleasure. It comes from joyful commitment to objectives that really matter. It comes from the feeling of growing, of becoming a better version of yourself every day. This is much more satisfying than any pleasure you can buy or consume. There's a huge difference between pleasure and happiness. Pleasure is momentary, superficial, always needs to be renewed. Happiness is lasting deep, comes from within. Pleasure you seek outside. Happiness you build within yourself through your choices and actions. When you understand this, you realize that avoiding effort to be happy is like trying to get somewhere without leaving home. It simply doesn't work. Happiness isn't a destination you reach. It's a natural consequence of living according to your deepest values and facing life's challenges with courage. Now, we come to the central point of all this. To escape mediocrity and the madness of the modern world, you need to make two fundamental choices that most people don't have the courage to make. First, accept that legitimate suffering is part of life and stop trying to run away from it. Second, Declare war on laziness in all its forms, especially the most subtle ones. This doesn't mean you have to suffer unnecessarily or be hard on yourself. It means consciously choosing to face the real problems in your life instead of creating artificial problems by trying to avoid them. It means choosing the temporary discomfort of growth instead of the permanent discomfort of stagnation. It's a choice you make every day at every moment. When a problem arises, you can choose to face it now or leave it for later. When an opportunity for growth arises, you can embrace it or find an excuse to avoid it. When fear arises, you can go through it or go around it. The path to escape mediocrity doesn't have ready-made formulas or miraculous recipes. Each person has to discover their own way to grow, their own obstacles to overcome, their own lessons to learn. There's no manual that works for everyone because each life is unique. But there are universal principles that apply to all growth journeys. The first is that you can't outsource your transformation. Nobody can grow for you. Nobody can solve your problems for you. Nobody can make your difficult decisions for you. It's work that only you can do. What exists are universal principles. The principle that problems are inevitable, but growth is optional. The principle that you can choose between being a victim of circumstances or the protagonist of your own story. The principle that avoided pain transforms into much worse suffering, but faced pain transforms into wisdom. Walking this path requires three qualities that our society doesn't encourage much. Courage to face uncomfortable truths about yourself and about life. Initiative to act even when you don't feel like it. And independence of thought to follow your own path, even when everyone is going in the opposite direction. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the capacity to act despite fear. Everyone has fear. Everyone has insecurities. Everyone has moments of doubt. The difference is that some people let fear paralyze them, while others use fear as fuel for action. Initiative is the capacity to begin to take the first step, to not wait for circumstances to be perfect. Most people keep waiting for the right moment, the right motivation, the right conditions. But these things never come. You have to start where you are, with what you have. Independence of thought is perhaps the most difficult of the three. It means questioning what everyone accepts as truth. Thinking for yourself. Forming your own opinions based on your experience and reflection. It means not following the crowd just because it's easier. Most people prefer to follow the crowd because it's easier, safer, doesn't require much thinking. But the crowd by definition is in mediocrity. If you want different results from the majority, you need to make different choices from the majority. And this inevitably means at some moments being alone on your path. There's nothing wrong with that. Actually, it's a sign that you're on the right path. As poet Robert Frost said, "I took the road less traveled, and that has made all the difference." The road less traveled is always harder at the beginning, but it's the only one that leads to places truly worth reaching. Solitude and isolation are different things. Isolation is when you're disconnected from the world out of fear or resentment. Solitude is when you're connected to yourself, to your values, to your purpose. A person can be surrounded by people and feel isolated, or can be alone and feel deeply connected. The truth is that life is going to test you anyway. You can choose your tests by consciously facing the challenges of growth, or life will choose the tests for you in the form of crises, illnesses, destroyed relationships, lost opportunities. One way or another, everyone pays the price. The difference is that when you consciously choose the difficult path, at least you're growing in the process. It's better to face problems while they're small than wait for them to become crises. It's better to have difficult conversations today than destroyed relationships tomorrow. It's better to invest in your growth now than regret lost opportunities later. And here's the most beautiful paradox of all. When you stop running away from life's difficulties and start facing them head on, you discover they weren't as scary as they seemed. The anticipation of suffering is almost always worse than the suffering itself. And on the other side of each solved problem is a version of yourself that's stronger, wiser, and more capable. It's like learning to swim. Before getting in the water, it seems impossible. You imagine you'll drown, that you won't be able to do it, that it's too dangerous. But when you finally get in the water and learn, you realize it wasn't as hard as you imagined, and now you have a new skill that will last forever. The path to escape mediocrity is there, available to anyone who has enough courage to walk it. It's not an easy path, but it's a path worth taking. It's the path that transforms problems into wisdom, pain into strength, fear into courage. It's the path that few choose, but that's open to those who really want an extraordinary life. This is the invitation that life makes to all of us every day. It's the invitation to grow, to evolve, to become the best version of ourselves. Most people ignore this invitation because it seems too difficult. But for those who accept it, the reward is a life of meaning, purpose, and genuine fulfillment. The question that remains is, which path will you choose? The path that everyone chooses, which is easy at the beginning, but leads to frustration in the end, or the path that few have the courage to choose, which is difficult at the beginning, but leads to true transformation. The choice is yours, and yours alone. Nobody can make it for you. But know that this choice will define not only what you achieve in life, but who you become in the process. And ultimately, who you become is much more important than what you achieve. If this content made you think differently about your own life and about the choices you're making, don't forget to hit that like button so more people can find these ideas, and subscribe to the channel to receive more content that will help you walk your own path of growth and transformation. Until the next video.